Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching. A woman who leisurely strolled down the street on a summer evening at first glance could be given 40 years old. And only a very attentive eye could tell that in fact she was hardly older than 35. The graying of her temples and wrinkles in the corners of her eyes added to her age. It was hard to see the wrinkles, though. Her eyes were covered by sunglasses, though it was a cloudy day. Long blonde bangs fell down over her face, but it was hardly a fashion statement. It was more likely to suggest that the woman didn't care how she looked. The street she was walking on ended in a dead end. Local homeless people had set up a shelter there, a sort of tent camp. The location was perfect. Everything necessary for life was there. The river was nearby, and one could bathe in it, or even fetch some water. Not particularly clean, of course. But there was no other, after all. Just across the river, as far as one could see, lay the city dump, an El Dorado. The dump was the breadwinner for those who had nothing to live on. It was here that all the stale goods, not only from the stores but also from the restaurants, ended up. And it was always possible to get some kind of clothes. Even medicine was to be found, and quite often, of course, in the city, this street and the entire neighborhood, and most of all, the tent city, were notorious for having a bad reputation. But only those who had never been there judged it that way. Residents of the neighborhood were initially outraged by the homeless communal apartment and tried to fight it, but then tired of writing complaints to the administration and put up with the neighborhood. And the homeless, in gratitude, tried to behave decently. At least they didn't cause a riot and drank only in their own territory. The result was quite a peaceful coexistence. From time to time, new faces appeared at the tent city. Thus, at the beginning of spring, this woman settled in. Who was she, and where had she come from? That remained a mystery to everyone. She did not tell anybody her name, and she did not make friends with anybody either. She spoke little and only out of necessity, but she searched the landfill for not only food and clothing, but also for books. At first, this shocked the neighbors. But when the woman gradually built up a small library, they began to lend her books. She willingly shared, and you could say she started a new fashion. Deprived of TV and the internet, the homeless found in books everything they lacked in everyday life. New impressions, interesting reflections, finally, beautiful speech without rudeness and profanity. Books also gave them new things to talk about. The readers now exchanged impressions, and quite often sat down for long discussions, sometimes quite heated. At the same time, the homeless people concluded that it was most likely that she had recently become homeless. Her love of reading was not the only indication of that. There were also more trivial things. For example, an unquenchable desire for cleanliness. The woman washed her clothes in the river and bathed daily, regardless of the weather, and probably suffered some serious blow of fate. Her reticence and unwillingness to make friends was an indication of this. The homeless people had had enough of this information, and in the end they left their silent neighbor alone. Walking in the evening was one of the woman's favorite pastimes. For some reason, she often wanted to be among people. In the very beginning of her life in the tent city, she even came to sit with her neighbors by the fire. But she quickly realized she did not like it there. The homeless people were pestering her with talk, and their sociability increased in proportion to the amount they drank. Both the drinking and the talking made her sick. But walking down the street among passers-by like her was great. No one here cared about her. You walk along and people rush by who don't ask questions, and yet you manage to feel you're not alone. Moving stream of people and you with him. The routes of her walks changed every day. The woman had no favorite places, and maybe she did not want them to appear. It was as if she consciously avoided any, even the most insignificant attachments, and carefully nurtured her freedom from them. This time she crossed her neighborhood, unnoticed, and found herself in the center of the city. The center was also quite suitable for a walk. There were always plenty of people here, and that was all she needed. The only thing that got on her nerves was the constant noise and the abundance of cars. Just now, a woman stood at a crossroads, waiting for a green light. It turned yellow, but the speed of the drivers was so fast that it was clear that not everybody was going to stop. The eternal problem of big cities. People here never let go of the habit of rushing. It was as if everyone was feverish. Everyone had no time. And everyone thought, I'll skip ahead unnoticed, save a few minutes. And even pedestrians standing at the crossing are nervous, shifting from foot to foot, as if this will turn on the cherished green light faster. The woman unwittingly noted that her neighbors on the sidewalk, a solid middle-aged man, an old dasher lady with a giant backpack on her shoulders, and a girl of 11 or 12, tried to stay away from her. It was hardly her poor but quite neat clothes or her untidy hair. It was just a feeling of loneliness that enveloped the woman like a protective cocoon, keeping her away. And those around her could probably sense it. The yellow light finally flashed and switched, and the traffic light began its tedious song. The traffic light is green. Crossing the street is permitted. Pedestrians moved along the zebra almost simultaneously. True, teenage girl, still one step ahead of the others. Kids are always rushing around. The woman grinned, looking at the girl, and in the next moment shrieked, grabbed her by the scruff of the neck and forcefully tugged at her, dragging her to the sidewalk. A shuttle bus, which darted around the corner, rushed past with a roar. The woman was breathing heavily. The girl not immediately realized what exactly had happened, but when she saw the bus rushing away in the distance, she groaned softly and pressed her hand to her mouth. Oh, thank you. Apparently only now she realized that she was miraculously unharmed. The woman reached into the girl's ear and pulled out a black button on her earpiece. Turn off the music at the crosswalks and keep your eyes open, she said. The girl's eyes were still frightened. Now come on, we can go now, said her savior. But the girl stayed where she was. My daddy is a rich man, she said. Is that so? Well, congratulations. The woman's lips smiled, but the tone with which she said the words was dry and indifferent. No, you misunderstand me. I didn't mean to brag. It's just that we can go to my father now, and he will be sure to thank you. He's a generous man, and you, I can see that you... It's not far from here. Over there. She pointed to a small building a couple of stories high, but long. That clinic. Is your father a doctor? He's the owner, the girl shrugged. But he's a doctor too, the head doctor. Shall we go in? The woman pulled her dark glasses down on the tip of her nose for a moment and looked intently at the brick building of the clinic. She suddenly became visibly animated, and in her eyes flashed unkind flames. Come on, she said, and put her glasses back on. No. The gold-haired receptionist at the doctor's office was nervous. John won't see you, not even me. The girl was surprised, and without any transition she shouted, Daddy, your secretary won't let me in, and she said. The office door swung open and the girl quickly slipped inside. Immediately there was a deafening clang. She cracked the cup, the gold-haired fairy remarked blankly. That's what spoiling children is all about. What's your name? Veronica. Does it matter? No. The fairy sighed and ruffled her beautiful curls. But it's easier to communicate if you know the name. Well, Veronica. You can't spoil a child the way John does. Veronica shrugged her shoulders. What's wrong with a father loving his daughter? Nothing, the secretary agreed. Only I don't think he loves her that much. He indulges her every whim, and he does not come home for weeks. He's out clubbing, he's out with girls. Always young, always drunk, Veronica asked. Are you allowed to talk about your boss like that? And if he finds out, from me, for example, and fire you, who would believe you? She nonchalantly replied, You are nobody, you just came in off the street. And even more disadvantaged with a lot of life problems, you can tell everything right away by your shabby clothes. Veronica wanted to say something in reply, but at that moment a girl ran out of the office. It's all right, she told Veronica. Daddy's busy right now, but we'll wait. Why don't I show you the hospital? It's cool, all the local nobles are treated here. And if anyone comes looking for you, we'll tell them you're my babysitter. Veronica looked at the girl curiously. For your age, you are an exceptionally smart little girl. What is your name? Julianne readily introduced herself. And I was waiting for you to ask, or not. The woman smiled, and this time the smile was warm and affectionate. She reached out and fixed the girl's disheveled hair. See? She asked. So, Julianne, will you show me this bourgeois lair? The man in charge never showed himself out of the office. Right here, Julianne pointed out. We have rooms for VIPs. Yeah, we don't have any other rooms. But Daddy says every rich man wants to feel like a respected customer. Not just a sack of money. And the service is pretty much the same everywhere. Veronica couldn't resist a short laugh again. I see that your father has let you in on all the secrets. You must be his princess, right? Probably, the girl answered, but her voice sounded sad. A princess. When he thinks of me, he... Julianne! A man's voice called out and the girl looked around. A tall man was hurrying toward them across the hall. Hello, Jacob, the girl said politely. I'd like you to meet. I know who it is, he smiled. This is your rescuer, Veronica. I'm sorry. Veronica, is it? I'm the head of the trauma unit. John is insanely grateful for saving his daughter and told me to tell you that as a reward he can hire you as a janitor. Who? Julianne's eyes, already large and expressive, became huge. Julianne, the superintendent, was embarrassed. I'm just relaying my father's words. Your new acquaintance can come to work for us. You can live in the back if you... Unless, of course, Veronica needs a place to live. There's always food in the dining room. Veronica, don't be angry with me for being so blunt, but it's obvious. Dad, I'm a bum. The woman asked me sharply. Well, yes, you're not wrong about that. And your boss is ready to hire a man without documents? I just gave you John's offer, said the doctor with every syllable. He made it clear that he didn't like the whole story himself. You don't have to point out the frivolity of a decision I didn't make. You decide whether you want to work with us or not. Veronica, said the girl, you'd better take it. After all, a roof over your head and a salary. Not much. But every month, and they always feed you. The woman pressed her lips tightly together. Her facial features were hard and coarse. All right, she said curtly. Tell your superiors we have a deal. That's fine. The man smiled for a strained moment. He left, obviously glad of the opportunity to wrap up this conversation. Don't mind your father's shenanigans, Julianne advised him. The main thing is that now you have a place to live, and there will be money. The nurse owner looked at Veronica with poorly concealed animosity. In their clinic, there was no random people, and even a place to cleaners just could not get. Chief Hole competition invented for candidates, who washed the floor in the treatment room, who did not leave a single corner of the dust. And he also wanted a high school diploma, who knows why. At times it seemed that John made up all these tests just to see how women in need of work, funny, try and want to impress. And the women were trying. It's hard to say why. The salary of a cleaner could not be called high, and with a system of fines, again, it was the chief physician's idea. She was left with horns and legs. And yet there was no shortage of applicants. Most likely so appealing acted the very name of this, the most prestigious and expensive in the city, clinic. And of course their petty interests too each had. Some hoped to make useful acquaintances among doctors, some counted on drugs and treatment at a discount. There were also those who pinned their hopes on wealthy patients. Young, pretty girls belonged to this category. They did not yet know that clients, though there were some rich bachelors among them, were accustomed to ignore the attendants. Well, here. The nurse hummed to herself, a miracle of miracles. Came some ungroomed rogue, and she immediately, without any competition, accepted. Here, she handed Veronica a folded hospital uniform. Change your clothes and tidy up your hair. You're not supposed to walk around here disheveled. One more thing, Veronica, on her way out. I don't know how the chief received you, but remember, it's dangerous to get carried away here. Don't think too much. He'll kick you out once he hired you, and you can always think of a reason. Don't let him see you again, understand? Especially in the morning. Can I do it in the evening? Veronica grinned. Evening is all right, but not in the morning. Chief physician card player. If he wins at night, he just comes in sleepy. And if he loses, he's as sleepy and angry as a dog. You have to admit, it's worse. You get caught in the heat of the moment and, well, don't get caught. Work in the clinic was like a fine-tuned clockwork mechanism. The organization was at its best. At 6 in the morning cleaning began. At 7 came the first patients, and the excitement did not stop until 9 in the evening. At 9:30 p.m., most of the staff went home. The attitude toward the new cleaner was a little strange at first. Eat in the mess tent for free, she was told, but don't steal from the food on hand. Don't steal medications, they are all accounted for. Don't drain the detergents, there should be enough for the rest of the month. God damn it all. Veronica listened to this advice in amazement, and she couldn't understand why they all decided she had to steal everything that didn't fit. Could it be because she was untidy? But hadn't they? These glossy doctors and beautiful nurses ever been without money? Probably not. Otherwise, they wouldn't have acted like that. Wouldn't they have shown the least bit of sympathy? She didn't respond to their endless "don't steal." Or rather, she gave herself a murderous grin but never said a word. She did her job flawlessly, so they soon got off her back. She knew how to achieve that. The homeless people in the tent city eventually gave up on her too, with their inquiries. The worst test was the visits from the chief physician's wife. Fortunately, she came very rarely to see her husband, but on those days all the staff tried not to show themselves in the corridor unless they absolutely had to. At first glance, this tall, blue-eyed blonde seemed like an angel that came down from heaven. A wonderful smile, a perfectly straight back, a face with no signs of age. Plastic surgeons, in her case, worked perfectly. The girl could be 18 or 30, but only her passport knew the truth. A gentle, melodious voice and the grace of a ballerina. Her voice, to tell the truth, could quickly turn from gentle to shrill with horrible hysterical notes. It happened every time she came into the clinic. It all started with some insignificant little thing, like too hot coffee, and then the scandal grew, gained momentum, and now by the chief doctor's office could not pass without plugging their ears. She's a fool, the nurse simply explained to the hostess. For Veronica, over time, she began to feel something like a friendly sympathy. The new janitor was not talkative, efficient, but above all, she did not ingratiate herself to anyone. That commanded respect. The chief doctor foolishly married her. For prestige, she continued. Veronica raised an eyebrow. For what? For what? Well, yes, replied the nurse confidently. She's some kind of Miss something. Oh, won the city beauty pageant. I hoped London and Paris would be fighting over her, but something went wrong. The only people who fought over her were the local bohemians, and not seriously. It seems that she was the mistress of the owner of the city market. Then she left him for a plastic surgeon, and so she got to ours. That's true. She was lucky with her lover. Everybody should be like that. But she's got a temper, God forbid. You saw it yourself. It's just that she was forgiven for her beauty. Actually, she was prettier back then. Now she's got Botox and silicone in her. Well, I guess it's like Silicon Valley. She doesn't want kids. She's worried about her figure. And Julianne? Veronica asked. So she's not her own daughter. Jonah's daughter from her first marriage. It's an old story, she sighed. And sad. He had an orphan wife who was a surgeon, and not one of the last. So she gave birth to Julianne, and then... The baby was a year old at the time. She went to jail. It's kind of a murky story. They said she was dealing illegal substances on the side. Somewhere in jail, that poor woman died. Well, our main man didn't grieve long and got married to a new one. But I don't think he needs her much either. He's out and about, all nights in casinos, with girls, with booze. I wonder, Veronica said, how is it that with such a way of life he works, and no one has ever set him up? Well, said the nurse meaningfully, that's a different story. What did he do? Each department has its own manager. Innocent could not work, but it was not there. Gathers dirt on everyone. That's his main job. And everyone's afraid to say a word against him. There's something about her, this new woman. Veronica heard one day. She had been working at the clinic for a month, but the talk about her never stopped. The head doctor's decision to hire an ordinary homeless woman without documents was too strange. Veronica quietly approached the smoking room, where the voices came from. A radiologist was standing in the smoking room, and someone else was keeping him company, standing in the back. Looking closely, Veronica could recognize the head of the trauma unit. Remember when she first came here? Everyone was trying to give her a verbal kick. And now what? They almost stand at attention when she walks by. And you? Grinned the superintendent. And me, said the radiographer, slightly embarrassed. I don't know what the hell it is, but it makes me want to jump up and wring my hands at the seams. Crazy? Delirious, he held the smoke in his mouth and then exhaled it into the ceiling. It came out thick and white like a cloud on a frosty day. Crazy, buddy. But for some reason I feel the same way. Veronica didn't listen any further. A satisfied smirk played on her lips. Janitors, so they work just as hard, and maybe even harder than the others. Creatures of inconspicuous. One gets used to their presence as to their own shadow or the presence of a pet, and now in front of the cleaners to discuss work issues, while they blurted out gossip and conduct personal telephone conversations during working hours. Veronica was never offended. She didn't care. Did you notice? The nurses whispered. She's a ransom woman, but she knows about medication like a doctor. Any contraindications, side effects, analogs by heart. The grandmother in room 7 wouldn't leave the bathroom until our cleanliness fairy told her that the side effects of the drug drotaverine include polyuria. And there was a girl in 5 who couldn't digest all her bees. And Veronica was like, try these shots and you'll get it right away. Maybe she came from a family of doctors. Who knows, she doesn't talk to anybody. It's a character of hers. She only opens her mouth when it's necessary. I was afraid at first, confessed the third one, that she would start taking medicine. She looked so unreliable. She's all in, doesn't pay attention to anyone. I thought she was a junkie, for sure. But no, she didn't even steal one of her ascorbic acid. I also once tried to count drugs in front of her. On purpose. I wanted to see how she'd react. And how did she react? She didn't. All she said was that people often complain about Promedol. It kind of clouds the mind. Then she went on to mop the floors. Veronica, not paying any attention to the girls, walked past. The girls were frightened and hushed. Maybe she's deaf, one of them whispered, like she couldn't hear. Maybe she's a felon. Yeah, said a muffled voice. It's fashionable now to live in the back rooms. Think what you're saying. She's his mistress. Someone chuckled. Evan got tired of models, so he hooked up with that mummy. Shh. She'll hear you. No, she won't. I'll be quiet. But Veronica heard everything. She stopped, turned to face the girls, and measured each of them with a long, contemptuous look. You are not paid for clucking. You'd better get back to work. The girls could not find anything to say and silently scattered to the offices. Veronica quickly went into the back room and, pulling off her hands' thick rubber gloves, threw them in the corner. How tired she is of all these whispers. Is it so hard for everyone to mind their own lives and not poke their noses into someone else's? At least not without a direct request. And after all, we have no surgeons here now. It's late at night. Take him to another hospital. She heard a shout from the corridor. What other hospital? We can't take him there. That was another voice, distraught and helpless. Veronica went out into the corridor. In the waiting room, a man was lying on an expensive leather sofa. Next to him stood two others. The nurses, huddled together in a frightened flock, chirped something or other. He was seriously stabbed. It counts in minutes. And you say, well, we have no surgeons, you understand. The young receptionist was screaming. There is no one. Everyone is at home. What should we do now? Well, this is a hospital. Where else should we take him? Veronica ran over to the wounded man and felt for a pulse in his neck. Her movements were precise and collected. Fading, she said softly. Prepare the operating room. I'll help him. Who will operate? Barely articulated one of the nurses. I know. Fine, let's not argue. Veronica awarded the girl her trademark grin. We'll argue later. But you're a cleaner. He's bleeding internally. Veronica snapped at her sisters. He'll die if he doesn't. Anesthesia. Quick. Girls looked at each other but still hurried to the operating room. A gurney, continued to give orders Veronica. Men, help me move him. Don't shake him or he'll bleed to death. They took him like a log and moved him. They, like everyone else around them, silently carried out the woman's orders. You'll be responsible for everything, muttered the receptionist. Veronica did not dignify her with a reply. The bright, cold light of the lamp, the cold of the instruments, the screen. And Veronica felt calm and centered detachment. She was in her seat now. So what do we have in terms of history? John stretched out lazily, flipping through the case history. He closed the file and pushed it toward Veronica. The patient was admitted in critical condition, but now he feels quite well and is not life-threatening. You sit down. There's no truth in it. He nodded at the visitor's chair. Veronica remained standing. She put her hands in her pockets and bowed her head slightly to the side, letting her know that she was ready to listen to more. Well, if you want, he shrugged. Then let's continue. The patient feels well, and why, and why. And why he thumped his hand on the table and broke into a shout that some scavenger, slave got out of nerve to take over the operation. Do you realize what you've done? You wretch. If he had died here, he's alive and it makes a difference, Veronica said without raising her voice. For Hysteria Chief Doctor, she watched without any fear, and even with some curiosity. I'll put you in jail, John continued to shout. You could put us all of us in a nunnery. You belong behind bars, you understand. And I'll take care of it. Veronica unhurriedly pulled her glasses off the bridge of her nose and tossed back her bangs. She'd looked at the world through tinted lenses for so long, the daylight hurt her eyes. Like when, years ago, when she'd had to be born a second time, and not of her own free will. Veronica was born into a family of doctors and was a late only child. That's probably why her long-awaited daughter was cherished by her parents as a gift from heaven. She had never seen so much adoration for a child, neither from her school friends nor later from her university friends. Her parents' dream was that Veronica would continue the dynasty and go to medical school, although the girl liked painting more. But she really didn't want to disappoint her parents. The only thing she insisted on was to be a surgeon. "Surgery, not a woman's business, kiddo," sighed her father. "It requires nerves of steel and a steady hand." Veronica kissed the old man on the wrinkled cheek. "Then I'll do," she said cheerfully. That was all the talk. The girl was always stubborn. She made an excellent surgeon, by the way. There was only one little thing left: to get married and have a couple of children. Her parents knew that Veronica was unlikely to listen to their opinion, but they secretly hoped that she would be interested in the son of their old friends. Mark was an ideal future husband for Veronica. The guy came from a good family, had a brilliant education. In addition, he was the only heir to his parents' fortune. She didn't have to worry about him being interested in money. Veronica, upon learning of this, was furious and threatened to leave home. She wasn't going to let her parents interfere in her personal life, and more importantly, she was already in love with someone else. Evan, or Kent, as his friends called him, was the kind of bad boy that makes good girls lose their heads. Kent had 1,000,000 random girlfriends and 1,000,000 gambling debts. He was a reckless party boy with a guitar and poems and flowery toasts to beautiful ladies. He also had a chiseled profile and long bangs that fell over his gray eyes. Girls were invariably drawn to remove that strand to look into his eyes, and Kent knew it. His eyes were mischievous and amused, but he could give them another expression too, one of underlying sadness and wariness. So he was becoming immensely talented and jaded by his otherness, a romantic who was already desperate to meet a soulmate. In addition, he had a remarkable ability to listen, which quickly earned himself a reputation as a sensitive and understanding. All these qualities worked without fail on girls, and a girl from a good family, Veronica, was no exception. She was too young to understand that characters like her lover are best admired from a distance. Upon learning that Veronica had already had a prosperous suitor in mind, Kent immediately asked the girl to marry him. Before she agreed, she glimpsed that for a family life such as Kent's was a moot point. But who stops that when her heart flutters with the heat of love? The girl's parents accepted their son-in-law reluctantly. "I don't like this boy," confessed the girl's mother. "He's 5 years older than Veronica, but he's not very successful in his profession. And the cards, he's a gambler, and they often end up badly." Veronica frowned but said nothing. Deep down she knew that her mother was right, but how she wanted to believe in a fairy tale where anything was possible. Romantic tramps and cartoonists become devoted husbands without losing their charm, and good girls become adventurers, but remain decent and honest. The mother, seeing her daughter's hesitation, hastily added, "No one is not telling you. Do not marry. Get acquainted more. Look at him better." Veronica guiltily threw his arms. "I do not have a choice. I'm expecting a baby with him." "Let's open our own clinic," her husband suggested. Veronica looked at him with a hazy look. Her parents had been killed in an accident not long ago, a month ago, and she still couldn't recover from the grief. Evan sat down next to his wife and took her hand. "You need a distraction," he said tenderly. "Your parents are making you suffer so much, and you can't bring them back, even if you cry. Maybe a new case would keep you busy, help you calm down. We have a child. We have to try to pull ourselves together, at least for the sake of our beloved daughter, Julianne." At the time, Veronica had no idea that her husband was preparing a trap for her, from which she could escape only by miracle. A month after the clinic opened, Veronica was accused of selling drugs. From somewhere there were both witnesses and evidence. The criminal investigation went off without a hitch, and Veronica went to jail for 10 long years. A new surprise awaited her at the transit point, a blow to the head with something heavy and the words "Hello" from Kesha. Losing consciousness, Veronica even rejoiced that now the nightmare that her life had turned into was over. But she had to go back. "Are you all right?" a woman's voice asked her cheerfully as Veronica opened her eyes and groaned, muffled in pain. "Lucky you. Now live. Now live. There, no pathos, no angels with trumpets. Just a husky voice and two short words. She never knew who said it. Could it really have been an angel? All these memories flashed through her brain in less than a couple of minutes. The woman came back to reality again and saw the enemy standing before her. She had once called him her husband. "And you've already put me away, hubby," she laughed. "Do you really want to do it again? Aren't you afraid?" The chief doctor looked at the woman, it seemed, calmly and without any expression. But Veronica could see the large beads of perspiration on his forehead. His knuckles were white from bruising his skin as he leaned against the table. "Don't kill me," he said hoarsely. "I didn't know you were. You were supposed to be." His voice became almost pathetic, as if he were afraid to cry. "You died a long time ago. I know you did. They told me it was all right. I didn't know. I didn't know that you survived." Veronica threw Veronica scornfully. "And I couldn't have died. I hated to give you so much pleasure. Sit down, I won't kill you. I have something else in store for you." The ex-husband glanced furtively out the window. "It's not very high, the floors are low. Old building. If you fall right. Drunks fall out of windows sometimes, not a scratch afterwards. You can try. If you jump from the third floor, you'll crash. But that's if you're lucky." Veronica guessed at his intentions. "But there's a lawn down there that will soften the impact, and you'll probably just be crippled for the rest of your worthless life. Your silicone doll will leave you instantly, of course, and you'll be alone, broken and miserable. Maybe even quit drinking and get hooked on something else. Or maybe you'll start mixing it up. You'll have your reasons, no doubt about it. The constant pain, the infirmity, you won't even be able to go to the toilet by yourself. Viper." The chief doctor bellowed with fury. Tears, large and bitter tears of rage, covered his eyes. "And also," Veronica continued almost dreamily, "in the depths of your black, vile little soul, you will hope that a cocktail of alcohol and something forbidden will one day finish you off. But it won't. And you know why. Because that's where I come in. I can't leave the father of my own daughter in this kind of trouble." She smiled, but her smile was more like a predatory grin. "Risen from the dead, the forgotten ex-wife will solemnly return to your, and in fact to her own home, to her unhappy husband. Everyone will applaud my selflessness. She returned to take care of her disabled husband. But know this, you bastard, I will make your life a living hell. Day after day, night after day, night after night, I shall make you a living hell, and no one will suspect a thing." Veronica made herself comfortable in her chair, put her hands behind her head. "Think again before you jump. Personally, I'd rather confess everything and go to jail." "What makes you think I'm going there?" The chief physician grumbled. "You can't prove anything, can you?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Can't I? Then why are you shaking like a coward?" "Sit down," I said. He obeyed. Slowly, as if under hypnosis, he lowered himself into the chair and looked fearfully at his ex-wife. "What is going to happen now?" he asked with tears in his voice. He was trembling violently. Drops of sweat trickled down his temples. It was unpleasant to watch. Veronica took the tape recorder out of her pocket and put it on the table. "Tell me about what happened," she said, taking a seat in the chair across from her. John looked into Veronica's eyes and realized that there was no mercy to be expected from her. And then he rubbed his forehead, took a couple of deep breaths, and then he lit a cigarette and began to talk. "I was a loser," he said in an almost calm voice, and exhaled a puff of smoke into the ceiling. "I knew my vices would ruin me, but I couldn't stop. I am a gambler. They say addiction to games. That doesn't matter what you play. Slot machines, thimbles, cards. They say that's silly. I, for one, like cards. It's, you might say, my only love. Alas, there is no such profession. A card player. A hustler, yes. But that's not it. Cheating is just dirty cheating. You're one to talk. Veronica snorted. The chief doctor looked at her with surprise. You wanted me to tell you everything. I'm telling. To tell you how you put me in jail, not to spout your memoirs. Whatever you say, he shrugged. When you're 30 and you have no tenacity, no talent. I gambled, hoping for a good winnings. I didn't have much money, and that wasn't surprising. What I earned, I squandered quickly, and I didn't earn much. And it wasn't my thing to work myself to the bone, so that in 10 or 15 years, if I was lucky, I could get dividends. I am an adventurer by nature. I need everything at once. But I wasn't very lucky at cards. But in love, too much. Girls liked me, and one day I thought that too. Well, kind of a good card. Play it right and you get it all. But as luck would have it, the girls were beggars, almost like me. They were greedy for money, for cheap pleasures. They were fun, but I didn't need them for my future. And then I got a chance. A rich girl. Naive as can be. It would take a couple of evenings to seduce her. I was suddenly very lucky. Her parents had died. All their money went to her wife. I had to act while she was still reeling from the shock. I suggested that she open her own clinic. On the whole, my goals had been achieved. Money, welfare, and now even stability. People are always sick, which means that the clinic will not close. If competently set the case, there was only one thing to do, to send somewhere his wife. I came up with some plan, and then I got rid of his wife. I could get a divorce, but then I would be left with nothing, and that would be unpleasant. So then I decided to set up my darling other half in an illegal drug trafficking case. When the chief physician was led out of the office in handcuffs, none of the staff felt any distress. How are you today? Veronica asked, leaning toward the rescued man. Even after becoming chief physician and owner of the clinic, she always found a minute every day to check on her first patient. Patients were different. Veronica knew that well. Some complain endlessly, some suffer in silence, but this makes them angry. And there are those who are determined to make a full recovery, and such people always try to keep a good mood. Her patient was just like that. He always greeted Veronica with a broad smile and noted the slightest improvement in his well-being. She already knew that his name was Andrew and that he was a police officer, and the stab wound was revenge for. It doesn't matter what for, he answered evasively. It's our job. That's why I never married, so I wouldn't leave my wife a widow. Now I think I shouldn't have. When you got a family, you got somebody to take care of you, don't you? Do you have a family? Veronica smiled. It was clear to her now that Jacob had gone to all the trouble to find out if she was married. Well, that wasn't surprising. After a week spent in the hands of experienced beauticians and makeup artists, no one would have recognized the spectacular woman as yesterday's homeless woman. I have a daughter, she answered. She's a big girl now, almost 12 years old. He smiled and touched the bandage on her stomach. Will you introduce me to her when I am well? I always wanted a daughter. Besides, I owe my life to you. No, Jacob interrupted her. Please don't mind. I won't take no for an answer anyway. Don't even think about it. Are you sure you can talk me into this? Veronica winked. And if I can't, well, said Jacob, I'll sing a serenade under your balcony every evening, and poetry too. And recite poetry too. And recite poetry too. If you only knew how disgusting my singing is, honestly, you'll have to accept my gratitude to stop this outrage. Very well, Veronica said with a sigh. Just don't give me candy, okay? I can't stand candy. I won't, he promised solemnly. Now, of course, I'm still a wreck, but then, when I'm a man again, I'll definitely invite you and your daughter to the best restaurant. And suddenly, Veronica felt that indeed she wanted them to meet. It was even strange. She had for so long, so terribly, unbearably long prohibited herself even to think about personal happiness. The price she had already had to pay for her love once was too high. But now, in Andrew's smile, in the warmth that seemed to emanate from him in waves, in his words, there was something that made Veronica think, what if this time is lucky? She suddenly felt like a frivolous and laughing 20-year-old girl who had no grief in her life. And she wanted to charm and flirt and walk under the stars and have Jacob walk her home after her walk, just like she had when she was young, and then a long kiss in the driveway and not be able to part until tomorrow. What nonsense, she sternly warned herself. Stop it, Veronica, don't be silly. But aloud, for some reason, she asked, is this going to be a date? Jacob, a little taken aback by such directness, laughed. If you like, he said, and bowed playfully to Veronica. He bowed to Veronica as much as the tight bandage would let him. And Veronica, in the fullness of her mischief, suddenly suggested, you know what, Jacob? We don't have to wait for a full recovery. Why don't you come to my office after dinner? It's not a restaurant menu, but I think we can order a pizza. Will you come? She noticed 2 pink blotches on his cheekbones and immediately felt uncomfortable. Don't think, she murmured. I didn't mean anything by it. But his usual self-confidence had returned. He hadn't. He grinned. No, he grinned. That's too bad. But I will come anyway. You must. Morning came very unexpectedly. Veronica had had enough nights in her life that seemed endless, but those nights were filled with death and bottomless despair, disappointment, pain. This night was different. Veronica didn't want it to end, but the sunlight was already tickling her eyelids, calling her to open her eyes and start a new day. Jacob slept peacefully, and Veronica was pleased to note that he looked much better than the day before. The painful pallor was gone, and there was no trace of the blue under his eyes. It's true what they say. Love is medicine, she thought. And she slipped out of his embrace, careful not to wake the sleeper. But as soon as she tried to stand up, Andre's arms pulled her back into place. Where are you going from me? He asked with a laugh. It's still early. For some reason, Veronica felt very ashamed. Oh, I wish he hadn't come yesterday. What was that all about? What he must be thinking of her now. Sorry about yesterday, she said without raising her eyes. I don't know what came over me. What difference does it make? He rolled over on his side and put his head in her lap. We had a good time, didn't we? We did, she smiled. Then there's no need to apologize. And by the way, girl, what? What? After what happened, as a decent man, I have an obligation to marry you. Veronica was about to burst out laughing at this common, but still hilarious, joke, and suddenly realized he wasn't joking. Andre's gaze was serious, even strained. It was a strange contrast to the casualness of his tone. What kind of rings do you like? He asked. I think we can go for them today. White gold with diamonds, Veronica blurted out. Are you really going to marry me? I'm an ex-convict and a homeless woman, and I just put my ex-husband behind bars. Quiet, quiet. He held up both hands as if in surrender. White gold, so white gold, why are you so nervous? I won't let it go, Nick, he said simply. Well, shall we go and choose the ring? I guess I don't have a choice, she grumbled, but she was glad in her heart. For the first time in her life, she was happy that she had no choice. No choice, she repeated, and quietly added, and thank God for that, and thank God for that. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.